Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage. We're taking a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're taking a look at a state of gaming, the shifting industry. And I think this is important to talk about because we're starting to see some of these shifts. And, for those of you that are new, this is all it's going to be, okay? It's just going to be chatting on the screen. There's something for you to view while you're listening, but this is more of a podcast. I have had some requests to have something on the screen at least, and hey, I'm working on that. I'm limited in my abilities, but I'm at least trying. Give me some brownie points for that. So for those of you that are sticking around, thank you. But we're going to talk about this shifting in the industry because we all know that something major is going on with AAA games. We know, too, that in many ways they feel like they're less. They feel like they have worse features or lack of features than their previous installments. They also feel kind of choked with bugs and glitches, and now it's not just, a month or a couple of months to fix a game. It is now like for 6 months or a year to fix the game. Some of these are really, really bad. Taking a look at Redfall, which will never really be repaired, or even Fallout 76, which took a couple of years, and even Cyberpunk 2077, which took another year or year and a half itself to fix the entire mess that they had on their hands. Some of these are successful, some of these are failures, and they stay that way, and they completely shut them down. And so I think it's important to talk about this. Also, too, just the aspect of now gameplay is now grindiness, in a mini live service aspects. And then there's longer dev times and there's larger price tags. And so what's going on with all of this? And why are AA's doing better than AAA's? And we actually see this generally speaking across the industry. And so welcome back to Gaming Garbage, folks. We're going to take a look at this state of gaming. I know we haven't had this in a while, but, this is where we just talk kind of some deep dives into the industry, and or at least take an aspect of it and dig deeper into what's going on there. So for some of us, we probably remember before live service. And for those of you that haven't, I feel bad for you guys because it was really good. It was truly amazing. So we had God of War and Ace Combat, Final Fantasy, Fable, Destiny 1. We had Black Ops 1 and 2. We had Metal Gear Solid, the Halo franchise, Legend of Zelda. The list goes on. We had a ton of these. And, once we had a successful live service show up, unfortunately, which the big one was Fortnite. It started well before that, with Team Fortress 2 and their hats, which made the game free, which was nice. But that really kind of kicked it off for a lot of the industry was Fortnite. And then after that, that became the trend for almost every single major IP that we now have today. And AAA publishers, they're continuing to do this, and will probably continue to do this for the rest of the decade. And so we've seen this now for roughly 10 years. It's hard to think Fortnite is that old. But, in some cases, we don't see it slowing down or changing. We see a few, companies maybe, or a few publishers or developers that are flat out saying, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have live service in our games. We're not going to go that way. Generally, From Software and Larian Studios, which is wonderful. Also, BioWare. They tried an entire live service online multiplayer mode, or game, which was Anthem, and that just totally flopped. They're not really made to do that. They're not good at building that. And I'd even say, too, with Bethesda, with Fallout 76, that was such an incredible mess and such a letdown. And then we had Starfield, which has no multiplayer, and so I think they're going back to their roots and going to what they know. And there's nothing wrong with having studios or publishers trying new things, but if you have really talented people that make really good stuff, let them make what they want to make, but generally keep the genre the same. They're not against making what they know. They're against making something that's boring or shifting it in a direction that they don't really know how to do or aren't comfortable with, and that's kind of generally the issue, just for any of us, not just for devs. And so with all of this, we've had more grindy gameplay. We can certainly see that. We've had higher costs for cosmetics. Even just the fact that we get cosmetics now is a bonus. Instead, when we used to get, some type of utility like vehicles or weapons, or maybe we got extra maps, or maybe there was extra storytelling there. We actually got to do that. At least Ubisoft is still producing that, but they are putting it behind the paywall of the season pass, unfortunately, which has more narrative expansions. But at least they're actually producing some narrative content instead of just saying, "Hey, here's a gold gun, have fun." But yeah, the utility too is also just kind of disappearing. Like I was just talking about. There's also been a larger focus on multiplayer. Again, when you can get more people to play together, you can make it more grindy, you can put more cosmetics in there. And we've even shared this with Activision's skill-based matchmaking. This was a state of gaming a long time ago, but we actually look into the patents of the company, and it was pretty shocking. It was pretty shocking having some of the patents focus on matching you with other players that had cosmetics you didn't, so that you would hopefully buy them, that you'd be more enticed to buy them. And they also screwed around with, some of the ping or some of the lag spikes and stuff, which for those of us that played actually a lot of COD in the last few years, we can certainly attest to that since like Modern Warfare 2019. But yeah, this has been frustrating. We've also had more free-to-play models, and so like X-Defiant is a great example of that right now, along with Overwatch 2. Now, Overwatch 1, we actually paid for. That was actually a cost. But Overwatch 2 and X-Defiant, these are free-to-play models. Even War Thunder, okay, it's not a new game, but it's an answer to World of Tanks. But yeah, both of those are free-to-play models, and they're grindy on purpose. And many of us, can look past that, but there still also needs to be content to actually work through and grind through. And like War Thunder is insane. Like I don't think I'll ever, quote, beat the game. I don't have enough time because there's all of the countries, there's all of the tanks, all of the airplanes, and all of the ships to actually work through in the game. And they're constantly also updating stuff too. We also see, again, skill-based matchmaking, where the focus is trying to match people with other people, basically all to get people to keep playing, to keep buying. That's the whole focus. And we've also seen, the birth of the Season Pass and then the creation of the Battle Pass. And we've also seen the ability to purchase those working through the entire Season Pass or Battle Pass. And now they've actually taken that away, like in Call of Duty. You can't pay for the entire thing anymore just by actually doing it if you get to the end. You now have to actually pay some money. And the amount that you get every year, like in Call of Duty, is actually less and less. And so, yeah, they're just finding ever creative ways to try to just get more money out of us. And for some companies, this is desperation. And other companies, it's greed. And there is a difference there. I do think we really need to recognize that this is part of the shift in the industry that we're seeing. And so let's go over how expensive this is actually getting for companies. Because this isn't just a little bit of money and a whole bunch of reward anymore. This is more like a few hitting it big, like YouTubers and streamers, and the rest suffering through the muck and mud trying to survive, like yours truly. And so let's take a look at 2012. So the games in 2012 were roughly like Borderlands 2, Mass Effect 3, and Darksiders 2. And this was before Fortnite, this was before the big push for live service, before Rainbow Six Siege, before Apex, all of that stuff. That stuff hadn't, quote, been around yet. And this is also the same time when Destiny 1 was released, which was so incredible at the time. It was truly amazing. I really loved that. But the average cost was roughly $30 to $40 million for a AAA game. And that was, about 12 years ago. So like Borderlands 2 was $35 million. Mass Effect 3 was $40 million. Darksiders 2 was $50 million. We also had Destiny 1, which was $140 million. Now, these likely are just the budgets. They probably don't include marketing. They probably don't include licensing stuff, which licensing, too, has also just gotten worse over time. That's why we now have EA's Football Club instead of FIFA, because FIFA was like, well, you're going to pay us $1 billion to use our name. And EA, even though most of us probably don't like EA, gave them the finger and was just like, frick you, we're not going to be doing that. And now they've actually made their own service, which has been incredibly successful, and a ton of people are playing it, and that is one of their biggest cash cows now. Which, good for them. Honestly, they adapted, they changed, and they saved $1 billion. Anybody that can save $1 billion, that's pretty dang good. That is pretty good. In 2020, roughly, some of these games will be 2019, some in 2020. You get the idea. The average cost then was maybe $80 to $100 million. So the price had gone up, maybe 2.5 times, or 250%. But we still had Ghost of Tsushima at $60 million. We had Breath of the Wild at $120 million. We had Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which was $400 million. That was the big one then. Last of Us Part 2 was $220 million. Cyberpunk, after their fixes and all of that, ended up being $316 million. This also includes their refunds, which I think were roughly, like 20 or 30 million in refunds. It is a good chunk of money as well. Because again, it was not a game that released good. A lot of people were frustrated. Even Sony was like, yeah, we're going to give refunds. They don't like doing that because they make, 20% or 30% off of their store or whatever. So yeah, the platform, they lose money too when they hand out refunds. And so this was definitely a change in the standard. And some of these games were really kind of going for it, like Destiny 1 back in 2012 or like Valhalla in 2020. But then we had a word we're not supposed to say. And here at the channel, we're not really into censorship very much, including you guys in the content, in the comments. Keep it civil, be respectful. But, if you're going to be like on my Twitch and just spam chat and, say a whole bunch of random nonsense, then yeah, I'm just going to block you, okay? We're not talking about that type of censorship, but just the ability to express your own feelings instead of grabbing for attention. But like after the lockdowns, after COVID, we had $10 trillion in stimulus, and this wasn't just necessarily for the taxpayer. We don't really know how much money was pumped into the economy because we also had different types of loans for companies, for banks, for commercial real estate, for investors, for the stock market. I mean, the list goes on. We also had forbearance programs, government-backed loans that didn't used to be there. We had totally new entities to help basically supply funding for whoever needed it. It was crazy. And most of us are living it right now where we had that high inflation. Actually, the United States is one of the lowest right now in the world. In a lot of other countries, they still got really high inflation of like 5 or 10%, or even higher than that, depending on where you live. And so nobody's really doing good right now. And this inflation, it never went down, by the way. We've never had negative inflation. And so it has continued to stay at that level, and we continue to increase every single year. At least here in the United States, we're hitting like 3%. And then government-backed, and then we also have higher expense costs. So this isn't just actually paying stuff off the store. This is also like insurance. This is also taxes. This is also more regulatory fees from the government. And everything just costs more. I mean, we've basically doubled, a little bit more than doubled our bill for groceries in just the last 2.5 years. And that's been tough. Homeowners insurance has gone up, about 33%. We've also had insurance go up on our cars, so we took more things off of our coverage just so we could make it cheaper. And we drive more carefully, too. But in 2024, let's take a look at what some of these games cost now. Oh, I must also include Elden Ring DLC. This was like 2022. But yeah, we'll get into that. I'll get there in just a second. But in 2024, the average is now 150 to 200 million at a minimum for AAA games. I'm not even kidding. This is not the average. This is actually basically where the minimum is. This is the floor. So we had Suicide Squad at over 200 million. Again, like this was what they lost. This is not what they put in. The budget wasn't 200 million. It was bigger than that, but this is what they lost on the game. And so over 200 million. We also had Starfield at 200 million. We also had Baldur's Gate 3 at 100 million. It's actually really nice. They're a smaller studio. That's part of the benefit of that. Skull and Bones at 120 million. Spider-Man 2, which is 312. I think that was 23, wasn't it? Some of this is going to be 2023 stuff. But Spider-Man 2, that was 312 million. God of War Ragnarok was 200 million. We also had Elden Ring plus the DLC. That'll be at over $200 million to create and produce. That was 2022. The DLC is actually coming out now, next month in June, at the end of June. We're definitely going to be playing it here, so stay tuned for that. We also had Avatar Frontiers of Pandora at 150 million. That was an Ubisoft game that came out last year, roughly about 7 months ago. And so we've been seeing just this huge increase for the companies. And even like Alan Wake 2 at $75 million, they're hoping to break even at the end of 2024, which is a 14-month time period. Like, they're hoping to break even at 14 months. That is insane. And so we have a new floor, folks, for the cost of games. And this is why we're seeing layoffs. This is why we're seeing less contract workers working on stuff. This is why we're seeing more bugs. This is why we're seeing studio closures, canceled games. Folks like Embracer Group selling off some of their IPs in other studios like Saber Interactive and Gearbox because they need the money. This is becoming a problem. Now, for those of you that don't like big companies and the rich and whatever, well, they're rich for a reason, okay? They have created a service or a product, and people have voted with their money and given it to them. That's what's happened. That's called capitalism. Now, I agree, the greed is definitely a problem, but I don't think all of these companies are necessarily greedy. They're changing things out of desperation. And so we've gotten to look at I'll get into that too. Let me keep going. I don't want to skip ahead. So what does it look like ultimately? Like next year we're going to get Grand Theft Auto 6. This is going to be in 2025, and it has a minimum budget of $1 billion. $1 billion. Now, do I think anyone else is really going to keep up with this? No, probably not. We've even heard from Sony that, hey, we're going to shrink budgets. Spider-Man being $300 million was too much. Okay, we're going to shrink it down. They saw definitely a lot more benefit with like Miles Morales, which was $95 million. They definitely saw a lot of profit return on that. So I think we're going to see more of that in the industry. But yeah, GTA 6 is going to be huge. Even after, if they have delays, accounting for inflation, marketing, everything else, this could be a $2 billion game. Like, sinking $2 billion into a video game and going for it. Also, I think what we'll see with Grand Theft Auto 6 is that this will be the craziest live service we've ever seen. I literally think they're going to pull out all of the stops, like some of with what we've seen with Grand Theft Auto 5 over the last 12 years, maybe 13 now. But also just what else they're going to do, what else they're going to see in the industry and be like, hey, we're going to try that too. I think it's going to be nuts. And I think, too, this is the first possibility. It's been rumored around a little bit, is just an idea, discussion around how expensive games are, is that this might be the first increase of maybe a game that's $80 or $100, because people will still pay for it. This is going to be the biggest game launch, most likely, and I hope they're ready for it. Because, boy, if it has multiplayer, I mean, they're going to have probably over 10 million people trying to hop onto the servers and going for it, and that is going to be some wild stuff. They're going to sell tons of copies. It's going to be crazy. But yeah, for Grand Theft Auto 6, the breakdown, they'd have to sell at a minimum 15 million units at $70, all the way up to 30 million units just to break even. So again, the last 11 years, Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold on 195 million. And so they've definitely made their money back. Okay, this also doesn't include all of the subscription stuff, all the live service stuff, all of the bundles, whatever. Doesn't include any of that, so they've definitely made a ton of money, and they've made it back. But what about other companies? Can they keep up? Is this why we're seeing the cancellation of video games, the closure of studios, and even the, scaling back of budgets for certain games? And even, too, just the focus of companies being like, look, these franchises make our money. Let's just focus on that. And so the best Call of Duty to sell ever was actually Black Ops 1 at a little over 30 million units. Like, Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the best-selling games ever. Even taking a look at the list right now, Minecraft has beaten it at 300 million units sold of Minecraft, but Minecraft's also like a 15-year-old game. It's been around forever, and it's been a wonderful platform, and it's also been pretty cheap. I wouldn't say Grand Theft Auto 5 has been very cheap for a lot of people, especially those still playing it today, but there is a ton of money there to be made for Grand Theft Auto 6. So the expectations are really high, and boy, it better not come stumbling out of the gate. Otherwise, they're going to lose a ton of money potential, and they're going to botch it. Now, those that own Rockstar is Take-Two Interactive. And we've seen, too, the first one to increase their price at $70 was actually 2K NBA 2024. They went from $60 to $70, and they know people would pay for it, and they did, and they made their money, and they had a whole bunch of live action service garbage in there, too, that they added compared to the previous iteration of that franchise. And so I think we can continue to see that in Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm actually really curious. I'm actually more curious about how the live service is going to be implemented in the game. The sales of the game, the servers, all of that kind of stuff, rather than the actual story of Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm not overly interested. Like, I will play it someday, of course, because I really enjoyed 5 for what it was. But again, I don't think the story is going to be worth the $70 to me anyway. For most people, it probably will. Again, they will sell a ton of units at launch, I have no doubt. So if Call of Duty needs, again, they definitely make their money, but if Black Ops 1 was the best Call of Duty ever, what about other companies? They're successful, but like Roblox, they've never made a profit, and they still run today. Fortnite has had tens of millions of players, but even they're struggling to keep player retention. They've had to change maps. They've had to add more modes, like the whole Lego stuff and being able to create and build. And, they've had to adapt, and they've done very well. And their licensing, too, has kept people playing the game on basically the same map with some different guns and gear, and it's still fun for what it is. Those people still continue to play. But many big publishers, they're losing money. They can see the writing on the wall. And generally speaking, you work on cutting back before you really start seeing the pain. It's a way to kind of protect yourself, and companies will generally be more cautious than be more dangerous isn't the right word, but you know what I'm talking about. But then, so the ones that have lost a lot of money have actually been Square Enix, have been Ubisoft, Xbox, Sony, Embracer Group, and they've had to change their business strategies. And this is why, too, we've seen the layoffs, we've seen the studio closures, and the canceled games. Embracer Group themselves alone has canceled around 25 games just in the last couple of years. And again, we started with talking about the lockdowns with all of this extra money that we had, which attributes some of the inflation, of course. But we've also had all of these companies and publishers basically go beyond their skis. And now it's like, oh yeah, we're not really making the money that we thought we would. Some of these games are totally flopping, and we're losing a good chunk of money. Okay, like Suicide Squad, losing $200 million on a video game is not something that you want to report to your parent company. That is not good. So where do I think all of this is going to end up? I think we've already seen some of the changes, okay? We're seeing the changing in business models. PlayStation is saying, hey, we need to expand and actually expand our player base. Xbox is doing the same thing, expanding the player base, getting more people to play leads to more whatever and sales and microtransactions, etc. We already know that. We're also seeing two new types of business models like Game Pass. Again, Game Pass has been around since like 2016. It's been around for quite some time. But they're also even changing how Game Pass is a little bit, and it's no longer just Xbox games and their subsidiaries. It's also third-party games, too. Anybody can have their game on Game Pass if they really want it. And so we're seeing the expansion of a cheaper type of service, because even if, of course, with almost 500 games on Game Pass, it's not a perfect service. And there are also some certain concerns there, too. But if I can pay for a month or maybe even 3 months of Game Pass and play the games that I want on there at a cheaper price tag, why not? Because let's face it, $70 is expensive, and $70 is not going to stay. It's going to continue to go up, maybe to $80 or $85 or $100. And we're seeing that too, where it's not just, the base game. There's also the other additions. There's more cosmetics. There's, less utility with like pre-order bonuses and all of this other stuff. They're just trying to sell you skins because that's what's cheap and easy and the most cost effective. And this is why a lot of us hate live service. But yeah, the business models are changing. I think still we will continue to see layoffs until profits turn around. Because, when we took a look at Square Enix's profits this last quarter, that was really bad. That was really bad. And Ubisoft's last 6 months, they finally turned a profit. But for the last 18 months, Ubisoft hasn't made money. They're still making money, but they're not making it at a profit. And so, these companies are having to turn things around, and this is why we've seen what we've seen. Even, too, sticking with what's going to, make money. Like Ubisoft saying, hey, we're going to focus more on Assassin's Creed. Well, great. Now we're just going to flood the market with Assassin's Creed. That's wonderful. Or like with EA, just focusing more on their, sports games. Like F1, Madden, NCAA now, which is coming out in June. And I'm blanking on the other one. Oh, yeah, Football Club. Like, they make a ton of money on those. That's what makes them great money, and they're going to continue to do that. And you go where the money is, unfortunately. But this also monopolizes the type of stuff that's out there to play. It kind of gets pretty boring. Excuse me as I have hiccups. And this is even what we've seen with live service, is that generally the business models of live service are the same. And it's just repeats and rehashes and the same map and the battle royales. And I mean, just think of that, the last decade we've seen a ton of these, and most of them haven't been successful. Most of them have failed. I think, too, we're going to see dying and shrinking live service games. Again, I mentioned BioWare. They tried Anthem, and they're like, nope, we're not going to do that again. And now they're making, Dreadwolf, which I guess is actually supposed to come out this year. But they removed the live service elements from Dreadwolf, and I'm actually very happy about that. Larian has come out and said, no, we're not going to put live service in our games. Yay, that's great. And Larian made a ton of money with all the sales they made. And so the dying and shrinking live services, the ones that don't adapt, they're not going to make it. But like the ones that are doing a great job so far are doing the licensing, are putting more game modes in, just like Fortnite. I don't think Fortnite's going anywhere. It's got a huge player base still compared to many others. And a ton of people watch it too, watch it to be streamed and stuff. One thing I am excited about this, though, with all of this stuff, of the costs and the layoffs and all of this stuff, is that I do think we're going to see new studios, and we're seeing that too. Even just this year, we have 100 Star, Bad Brain, Giant Skull, Empty Vessel, Elsewhere, which Elsewhere is more underneath Activision, which is underneath Microsoft. So it's not like it's a brand new independent studio. But the other ones I named, they're independent. We even had Toys for Bob go independent too, which is great. We also had Saber Interactive get sold to Beacon. And we also had Gearbox get sold to Take-Two Interactive. So there's kind of this breaking up of the industry, and even those that are getting laid off, well, they're still the good ones. They're finding jobs. So this should be a testament to you folks that when you're a good friend, when you're a good husband or wife, or when you're a good employee, you're going to be desired. You're going to be, kept and stuck around and invested in. And if you're mediocre or below that, probably not. Probably not as much. Your future is not as bright. So remember, folks, your life is your responsibility. Take it by the horns, baby. I think, too, we're going to see some companies accepting their place in the industry. They're not going to focus on growth anymore. They're just going to say, look, this is generally what we do. This is where we're at. This is what we make. We can't really expand, otherwise we don't really make any more money. And so for right now, we'll just kind of accept our place in the industry, and this is what we do, and we like it, and that's good enough for us. I don't think all of them, of course, are going to do that at some point, but I think some will have to kind of do that out of necessity, or they'll just have to quit. Because, those will be the two choices that they'll have. The companies and the publishers that have, huge control, they'll be like, woohoo, we're going to keep pushing, we're going to keep innovating as much as we can, and not all other companies are going to be able to keep up. So they'll have to accept their place in the industry. I think, too, we're going to continue to see smaller budgets, smaller games, like Hellblade 2. Holy frick, that is a small game. Simpler games even, okay, like Dave the Diver. Or like Dredge, or I think too we'll see a more acceptance of indie games from indie developers. They're smaller, they're simpler, they are shorter, but they're also cheaper too, because $70 is getting expensive. The fancy COVID editions of $100 or $110 or even $130, that's really kind of getting ridiculous. Even when you start seeing horse armor at $60. Or like the fancy gauntlet Kong glove of Call of Duty at $80. That's getting pretty stupid. Or the Unheard edition of $250 for Escape from Tarkov. Like, they literally just drank their own pee. Good luck to them, because they're not getting any nutrients from their player base. There will still be a few people that will stick around simply because they've spent so much money. But golly, and another example, too, is like Destiny. At some point, you have to come up with something new, and you can't just keep charging people more without giving value. And I think that's going to become a focus, too, is like value games. Okay, Elden Ring, it's sold like 25 million copies now, and they're going to continue to sell more copies as the DLC comes out. They're going to want to play it again. Or they're going to want to get other people involved. Hey, you going to play with me now this time? And I'm sure they're going to also get a ton of money, even though the DLC is $40, which is pretty steep for most DLCs out there. But, we trust From Software. We know it's going to be good. I think, too, we'll see more subscription services. Whether it's like GTA Online or whether it's something else, like Game Pass. There's just going to be a bigger push. It's like, instead of them just paying for the product, they can pay for a service. And we've already seen that in a lot of other facets of the industries around the world in the economy. And it's just natural that goes to gaming too, because that's easier, right? It's easier and you're able to get more money. But what happens when you've used all the tricks in the book and you're still not making enough? Inflation is still too high. It costs too much to have employees. We'll have to have a revolution. And that's why I fear AI. I fear of not just like Skynet and stuff, but also just people losing their jobs to AI, because we've already had some friends through our church or through our family or whatever where, they've lost their job because they can be replaced. Because they can be replaced. Not because it's impossible, but in the future, as some of these technologies continue to get better, more people will be replaced. And companies always look at the bottom line, small or big. The company has to make money. Unless, of course, you're the government, then you can just, spend as much debt as you want. Because, the gov. It's so stupid. I think, too, we can continue to expect expanding player bases and less exclusives. I think as especially Xbox and PlayStation are continuing to compete for their lion's share of the industry, I I don't see exclusives really sticking around, and I don't see the focus being the console anymore. Again, I think people are misunderstanding the business model that Xbox and Microsoft, or yeah, Xbox has shifted with, is that they're trying again to provide the service, not just with Xbox, but outside of Xbox, outside of their own studios. And they're trying to create something that has a lot of value in it, which I can see having Game Pass Ultimate, for $17 a month. Yeah, it's worth it, because basically I'm going to buy 2 games a year, and when you take out $60 multiplayer, I think it's worth it. Is the cost going to continue to go up over time? Sure it will. Sure it will. That's not going to change. And the $70 games, they're not going to stay at $70 either. We already talked about that. But yeah, I definitely think expanding the player base is going to continue to happen, and that means less exclusives overall. I still think some will be kept. But like we even just had Square Enix say, look, we're no longer going to do exclusives for Sony because we need to make money. So they're changing their business model out of desperation because they're losing a ton of it. They're losing some pretty big money, and they have to change. Otherwise, they won't be around as a company. I think ultimately, reputations in efficient studios, they will matter the most. They'll stay alive. They'll transition through this. And they'll be the ones, too, to make money. And again, we have an industry where, because of streaming, because of YouTube, and all of these like gaming outlets and news outlets and stuff, we're seeing a few really make it. And so if your game is amazing, if your game is wonderful and really is loved by a lot of people, like Helldivers 2 and like Pal World, you're going to make a ton of money. You are going to make flippin' bank. But otherwise, you're just going to be kind of forgotten. Like the Lamplighters League, like Banishers, even some folks with like Hellblade 2 that aren't a part of the Xbox community, they're like, oh, I didn't even know Hellblade 2 was coming out, or like Stellar Blade. Well, we all heard about Stellar Blade because of that kind of stuff, but like, what's the next Sony exclusive? Probably a good chunk of us, we don't know. And so I think the studios, they'll stick around, they'll make the money because of the reputation that they have, like Larian or like From Software. And then the reason we're seeing all of these layoffs and closures is because we need efficient studios in the industry right now to continue to make money, to be sustainable, to be profitable, because not all of them are. Just like Arcane Austin. Sorry to say, but you totally screw a game up like that, even if it's the leadership, the studio's not going to stick around. And I do think it should be the leadership that eats it instead of the devs. I don't think it's the devs' fault, but it's possible, too, that if you think you're going to lose your job, you're probably not going to work that great or work that hard. And I think that's an issue that Xbox has right now. I believe, too, that we'll continue to see pain in the industry. I don't think we're done with seeing expansions. Maybe kind of feeling out some new projects, some new passions there, but generally sticking to what works, what makes money. I think, too, the expenses have also gone up just way too fast. Again, we talked about the cost. I mean, in 2012, it was $30 to $40 million to make a AAA game. In 2020, it was $80 to $100 million on average. And now the floor in 2024 is $150 to $200 million. I mean, it's just insane. You can't have that fast of inflation or that fast of cost to your business without experiencing some major pain and having pullback. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's what explains this. And so the shift in the industry, it's painful. Okay, it's even painful to watch covering it here on the news. But I do think it's necessary. And I get excited for studios like From Software and Larian. They are continuing to produce games that's for the player, not for the business. And I get excited, too, about the new studios. Even with all of these layoffs, these closures, new independent studios are showing up, like Empty Vessel, Bad Brain, Giant Skull, and Uncapped, and the other one I can't flip and remember to save my life. Oh yeah, 100 Star. They're all showing up, wanting to create passion projects, keep the team smaller, focus on making good games, and selling it to us. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be. So that's the silver lining, folks. The gaming industry is not dying; it's changing. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me too at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. You can also follow me over at Twitch at Don't Tread on Thee. You can also check out our Discord server. It's not just to mingle and chat or whatever, but also to find others to play with, regardless of game, regardless of platform. And we have voice channels set up for you guys, and two, we would love to play with you guys when we can. Some of the games we'll probably want to keep just to Lion and I, or a few others, but like the Call of Duty stuff, or being able to play like War Thunder or something like this, and I'm gonna die a ton, but it's the experience, it's playing with folks, or even like Warzone or something. I ain't that great. I'm an old man. That's that's the running joke, and but hey, that's okay. I still enjoy playing video games. I still have a passion for this industry and bringing it to you guys. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Man, for any of you in the middle of the country right now with the tornadoes ripping through, oh man, I hope you guys are okay. That's been brutal to watch. So far we've had 18 dead, over 100 wounded, and a lot of damage. And we've had some pretty gnarly tornadoes, like in Rogers, Arkansas. There's been some pretty big ones too in like Missouri, I think. So yeah, just man. Hopefully you guys are okay. But even if stuff hit the fan, you can rebuild. It'll just take some time, and that's okay. So with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.